right, ladies and gentlemen, nice big warming round of applause for Mr. Brad Campbell. Or Brad Campbell. There he is. Yay!
When I was in my late 20s, I went looking for my dad. It was hard because he had been dead for almost 25 years. He was killed when the helicopter he was piloting experienced a catastrophic mechanical failure, went into a spin, an uncontrollable spin, and crashed. He was 38. I was 5, and even though I didn't know him well, I have these amazing memories of him. I remember nesting in his lap and him trimming my tiny fingernails. I remember him bundling my sister Kim and me up and driving us to the airport and loading us in a bubble-nosed Bell helicopter with no doors and cinching us into the same seatbelt and taking us flying. We were thrilled. The world distorted through that curved glass as we vibrated across the sky. I remember him leaving me in his truck one time momentarily to run into the post office to mail a letter. And within a few short moments, I had slipped over to the driver's side, put my hand on the wheel, dropped it into neutral like I'd seen him do dozens of times before, and started a slow motion roll out of the parking lot and into a busy street. I can still see him running after me, arms and legs pumping, as I made my slow motion getaway and eventually bumped to a stop on the curb on the opposite side of the street. I remember flying to our grandmother's house on Sundays, which was a regular occurrence, and 5 kids packed into the back seat of a Beechcraft Bonanza, my pregnant mom up front, and my dad flying the plane. And halfway there, I announced that I had to go to the bathroom. My siblings moved me up to the front of the airplane, and my dad stood me on his thighs, and he took out of his jacket pocket a perfectly pressed white starched handkerchief, and he folded it into this perfect little origami bowl. And with my mom holding my legs and him flying the plane, I peed into that cup. And he juggled the airplane and me and that cup with this sort of casual ease, like it was a trick he had perfected years ago. And of course, he was just making it up as he went, like all dads and all moms do. And when I was done, he emptied the handkerchief out of the vent, refolded the handkerchief, put it back in his pocket, and handed me back to the rest of my brothers and sisters. Well, and then another time we were flying, and we were just surrounded by these huge cumulus clouds. And being a kid, I said, "Dad, can you pull over and so that I can get out and walk on those clouds?" Because I'd seen paintings of angels on clouds, and I thought that that's what you could do. Well, his response was to fly through the cloud and totally blow my mind, because I just couldn't believe that something so solid-looking could be nothing but mist. And so I had all of these wonderful memories, but at a point in my life, in my late 20s, it wasn't enough. And if you would have asked me at the time, I would have said that the love that hurts the most is the love that's forever out of reach. And so I went looking for my dad, and I thought if I collected enough memories and enough stories that I could somehow bring him back. So I started interviewing his brothers and sisters and family members and friends and other pilots who had flown with him. I ended up studying his logbooks, which were like a mini diary of his entire adult life. I checked with all of his friends. I looked around. I found all of those kind of hidden little stories about him. I actually stood on the parade ground where he had once stood at attention as an aviation cadet in California. I learned to fly, and I actually bought a small plane and landed on some of the same runways that he had once landed on. And I heard so many remarkable stories about an amazing man. Otto Francis Campbell was born during the Depression. He was the 4th son of 15 kids. He learned to fly during World War II. He married my mom when he was 19. She was only 16. My oldest sister, Diane, was born in a 2-room shack with no running water, no heat. And within a few short years, I was born into middle-class comfort, thanks to the crop dusting business that he had really kind of wrestled up from the dirt in the Mississippi Delta. And he was, in all respects, an amazing individual, both as a father and as a friend and as a husband, as a businessman, and as a pilot, probably, perhaps most of all. My Uncle Coy, I think, said it best. He said, "Your daddy could flat make an airplane kiss his ass." And he loved to tease. He used to tell people in Moorhead, Mississippi, where he flew, that he had a pet monkey that flew with him that operated the hopper on the crop duster. He had high standards for all of his employees, but he had even higher standards for the people, for his family members who worked at the crop dusting business. He told Uncle Coy, he said, "You're a Campbell, and more is expected of you." Well, after collecting all these memories, I finally realized that I would never really be able to bring him totally back. That he was like that cloud that I saw that we flew through, impossible to hold on to. And in a way that broke my heart. I knew that I would never hear him say, "Good job, son," or "Didn't I tell you to take out the trash?" And I also realized that we were very different from one another. I'm emotional and sensitive and creative, and he was demanding and precise and a perfectionist. And I realized that we would have probably battled had he lived. And that raised another nettlesome question for me. And I couldn't quite put it into words until I was talking to my wife, Judy, and she said, we'd watched a documentary about a famous performer, Mr. Rogers, and she said, what you wanted to know was whether your dad would have loved you just the way you are. And as I was thinking about that, I realized that I'm really no different now than I was then, just balder. And he loved me then. He showed it by taking me flying and by nesting me in his lap and trimming my tiny fingernails, and by patiently helping me pee into a bowl that he had conjured out of midair from a starched handkerchief. And he would have loved me now had his star not drifted out of sight all these many years ago. A disappearance our family still doesn't understand, except that his light was destined to brighten up another corner of the sky.